I don't know about you, but this is pretty much my only form of human contact outside of Jerry. And so for me, this is really special to be able to spend time with everybody in conversation. So I just want to begin by saying thank you all so much for coming and really wanting to dive into this particular topic. And so we're here to discuss how to become an advisor, and it's going to be a great conversation between Jerry and Viraj Mody. They're going to be diving into a few topics, things like the difference between advising and mentoring and coaching, the problems you might run into, and the questions of like when and how to start. The way it's going to work is they're just going to chat for a few minutes just to do some context setting and for Viraj to share some of his lessons with it. But then it's really going to turn into a group discussion with all of us. But what's so exciting about this is the fact that we're going to be able to be in conversation with each other in such a much more intimate way. Quick logistics before bringing Viraj up. One, this is the last time I'm telling anybody when they should speak. From now on, it is up to you if you have a question to jump in. So my hands are off. I have no more role in guiding any of that. Let's bring up Viraj Mody. Viraj has scaled and led engineering teams both at Dropbox and Convoy in SF and Seattle, so across the West Coast. He previously co-founded Audiogalaxy, which was acquired by Dropbox. And most recently, he's leveraging his engineering skills as technical advisor to the CEO of Convoy. And I think another special thing to note is that Viraj and Convoy have been big sources of support for our community over the last few months, and they've helped host our first event in Seattle earlier this year. And so this event really is special. And so Viraj, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks. I'm super glad to be here. It's nice to be in the company of a bunch of impressive folks. So appreciate all you joining after work and after your bike rides.
Wonderful. Well, Jerry, it is the Jerry and Viraj show, so take it away.
Right. So before we start asking questions to Viraj, I like just share a little bit of context on this, why we're doing this event at all. So over the years, we learned that a lot of people in the community are actually very interested in being advisor, and some are looking for help from potential advisors for solving some of the problems they're having. But it takes a lot of effort to actually to make yourself as a known as advisor. Like depending on the network, and also some people need to do like a lot of writing, like speaking to get other people to know your advisor, and that takes a lot of time. And what the best part of that is just have the conversation and helping other people. So we try to understand what it is, and hopefully we can create some infrastructure or platform we can make it super easy for anyone to like either looking for help from an advisor or becoming an advisor to other people making contributing some of the sharing some of the learnings you have in the past. That's where we started, and with that, so I'm going to have a lot of questions for Raj. So my first question, looks like a lot of people have a different understanding of what being an advisor means. So can you tell us what's your understanding of advising companies and how it's different from like coaching and mentoring?
Yeah, for sure. I think there are a couple of references. There's like my title has a technical advisor role, which is different, I think, than the advising we're going to be talking about for the most part today, although I'm happy to talk about that piece as well. I think the advising that we're probably going to talk about is like, helping other companies and sort of using your expertise and or experience to provide insights and benefit for other companies, typically startups, in order to navigate something that you've dealt with in the past that you know something about. It's hard to claim that you're like the world's leading authority in any space, but it's generally like, look, if you have experience and knowledge that you can share, go help somebody out and help them avoid mistakes that you've potentially made in the past, or look around corners that you sort of didn't look around and were hurt by in the past, and now you want to make sure others can navigate that successfully. So that's generally the advising we're gonna be talking about. But I'm happy going either ways. There's also like the mentoring, career coaching piece of it, which I think, again, I'm happy to talk about, but it's probably not the focus of today.
Yeah, but how do you think it's different from those roles, being an advisor compared to like being a mentor or a coach?
Oh, I see. Yeah. I think the biggest difference is when you're So when you're being an advisor, you're actually solving a particular problem that is being posed to you because you have some amount of experience or authority. Versus when you're a coach or even a manager or a mentor, you're really problem solving with them and sort of helping them lead, like discover insights themselves. Like, if you think of a coach, they're never going to give you the solution. They're always going to help you find your way to a solution and like understand root causes. There's some of that obviously overlaps, in advising, but advising is more around like, hey, look, I have a problem, point me towards a solution. And then along the way, if I pick up any hints that help me, that's great.
So mentoring focuses more on the sort of long-term relationship and sharing the journey, and coaching is more like the inner work, versus less about solving a specific problem, like maybe technology-driven related. And what motivates you to be an advisor?
It's a complicated question. I think there's a little bit of, living vicariously through others. So obviously this is my answer. Others will have their own motivation. For me, it's mostly like living vicariously through like experiences of others. Look, I've started a company before. I've been at relatively larger companies since, or, I joined them when they were smaller, but then they've scaled pretty quickly. Um, I'm pretty sure at some point I'll start another company. But while I'm still in this journey with other companies and helping them scale, advising startups helps me sort of scratch that itch where I'm not a founder myself. I'm not like in the trenches myself, but I have like skirmishes with startup problems as part of just what I do. And I think so like that's a big component for me. The other part really is, when I was doing Audiogalaxy, I made so many mistakes, and I made the mistake of not having an advisor. Like we basically just learned things the hard way. In the grand scheme of things, when you're solving hard, interesting problems, reinventing the wheel does not benefit everybody. So part of my motivation is, look, if you're going to bump your head against a problem that I can help you solve, let's just, let me help you solve that so you can go bang your head against something really hard or something really novel. And then there's sort of the financial aspect of it, which is pretty nuanced. Just to be upfront, I know Jerry and I spoke about this when we were talking about it. I don't have any formal, like, I get paid a salary type of, or like I get paid a stipend or some sort of like comp component advising relationships. I advise 6 or 7 companies, but generally when it gets to some financial outcome, really it's about making sure that the founder doesn't doubt your motivations. And so like for me, it's mostly an investment in the company, right? Either like I get some stock or some sort of vesting schedule, or like I just go out and make an investment. It just like makes all incentives kind of nicely aligned where advice is worth like the price you pay for it. If it's free, it's worth nothing basically. And so like that's like a good incentive alignment piece. None of my advising companies have like exited or anything, so it's all monopoly money.
And to add on top of that, there are people that they're doing advising for a fee, and typically those are people have been doing that for a long time. So they have they have strong credential and been very known in your particular field, but there's a journey to get from like not doing any advising in the past, but to a point that you're well known and you can charge a fee.
Exactly. It's unclear to me. I think Jerry asked me when we were chatting, is that an aspiration you have? I don't know. But I do think like what you said is exactly right. It's a function of having expertise and experience that then people are willing to pay for. So I'm not there yet. If any of y'all were looking for that, you're sorely disappointed.
I think that's the majority of us. So people are just willing to help out, and to the point that you mentioned earlier, it'd be so nice that so we have a large community, so we can find a way to sort of channel in all the different learning experiences, so that we don't have to all invent the wheels, and can leverage the collective knowledge pool from the entire community. That would be something really amazing. So how do you think that being an advisor, connecting those startups, and helping you in terms of your own career goals?
Like I said, eventually I do want to start my own company. And I think when you talk to a lot of different startups dealing with different problems, you learn through them. every time I talk to somebody, almost never do I have a perfect solution that's going to fit their needs. I'll have some ideas, I'll start at some point, and then we'll collaborate, and then we'll get to like a decent spot, which is good enough to try. Um, and so it like helps me refine my problem solving skills in a startup setting. So there's a lot of like, you get good by practice, and this is practice. So that's one aspect for me from a career development perspective. It just helps me practice my problem solving skills and get more efficient at it. But there's a lot of like subsidiary benefits. I build my network so that tomorrow if I start my own company and I can pattern match to a problem that some other company is solving, I have connections. If I bump into somebody who'd be an amazing co-founder, employee, um, there's like, it opens those doors. And then I guess for me, it's still about, I try to advise companies where I have some ability to help them, but the problem they're working on is novel to me. And so it's, again, sort of as I map my career into like, I want to start my own company again someday. This gives me a good sort of breadth of insights into different type of companies. I'm at a marketplace company. Convoy is like a trucking marketplace. This is my first experience with marketplaces. I'm helping a company that's kind of building a marketplace for talent. Very similar in some sense, but like completely different in another sense. There's another company that does SaaS, and I've done SaaS before, but like the SaaS world is evolving so quickly, it's like a good way to keep in touch. So it's like kind of like having the ability to round out your skills while focusing on one thing.
So basically, it helps you to build up your expertise in particular area because you now have a more horizontal visibility.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a little bit of breadth, and then for each of these, I guess this is potentially a question coming up, but maybe I'll just talk about it now. For me, the thing that helps me sort of, I don't have like advisor on my LinkedIn resume or anything. I don't put the names of companies I advise on there because, like, for me, I have my own motivations. Part of this is not, inviting spam, and sort of getting like bombarded with like stuff. And this is not also like this is not a way to pad my resume or anything. It really is about identifying something I feel like I'm uniquely good at and helping others. And so one of the things that I think is key to advising from my perspective is knowing what sets you apart and what is your superpower in a way that others may not have it, and then sharing your knowledge there. So there are like scaling an organization. I've done it a few times now and I've made different mistakes. Thinking about compensation at different stages because I've dealt with sort of when it's worked and when it's not worked. Thinking about growth, like I basically ran several versions of that growth at Dropbox and also Convoy, and then at my own startup. So like, how do you engineer growth? There's a lot of, SEM, SEO type stuff. I don't know much about that, but it's more like product growth, analytics, that sort of stuff. So once you can identify what you're really good at, then you can start triangulating how you can help people. Because I'll probably say this a few more times, but like anytime I talk to somebody, I caveat anything I say with, look, you should take my advice basically for what it's worth, which is that's basically bullshit, and then apply sort of your judgment to what I'm saying. It just helps them understand that you don't know the answer, but you're just pointing in a particular direction.
You mentioned you have advised a couple companies. How do you get the first one? How do they reach out to you?
It's the network. So the first one was, I worked somebody I knew at Dropbox, went into VC, and then they funded a company where these people were trying to solve a problem that they knew I had solved before, and so they connected me. And they're like, hey, can you go help these folks solve this thing that you know how to do before? I've seen you do well. And so like the network is probably the biggest lever you have here. If you do something well, people you work with will notice. They'll know you do that well, and then they'll go to other places, and if they see somebody in need, they'll help connect you. So there's been a couple opportunities like that where like people I know have either started their own companies or know friends who needed help and said, hey, look, they need somebody who's done growth type stuff before. I've seen you do this well. Why don't you talk to them? That's one. The other avenue has been Techstars. So um, I'm assuming most of you all know Techstars, but it's kind of like a franchised YC type thing. Every city has one, and they have specialties like, there's a voice recognition specialty and a space specialty and biotech and stuff like that. So the Seattle Techstars thing has like a mentoring program. So some VC in Seattle connected me to them and said, hey, do you just want to sign up as a mentor? And so the way that works is, as they get a new batch of companies, those companies talk to you, and then they like meet with you, and then they like ask you to mentor them if you think you can be helpful. So that there's a couple companies that came through there, and then there's two companies that are like people I work with. Actually, both of them were I either managed directly or like were in my team, who then went and started their own companies and like wanted me to stay engaged with them to help them, worry about funding or like how to build a product or whatever.
And how much time do you really spend with when you're advising company, like the level of time commitment?
Yeah, I think Sean mentioned that, like, when you're busy with your day job, engaging in stuff like this is tricky. It is a commitment. In terms of time, I'd say I spend maybe like 5 or 6 hours a month. Roughly, it'll spike sometimes. Like, when COVID hit, work just got insane, and like this stuff also started, and it feels really bad to tell people who you're supposed to help that you don't have time, and so like it was kind of chaotic. But it's about 5 or 6 hours a month of like actual work time, and then there's communication back and forth with. It's like someone sends me an email about, hey, quick question XYZ, and I reply. Like I don't count that stuff.
So when I have a question, do you just share your perspective and experience, or do you actually work on something with them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll give you the sort of the bookends of the range, and then the sort of usual problem. So there's been one where I got connected to somebody who was starting a new company, and she was like extremely brilliant from a business problems analytics perspective, but really didn't have any engineering experience, and she was looking for like an engineering co-founder. And I didn't want to like go start that company, but while I was helping her out, I did a bunch of like prototyping on the side and hacking stuff together so she could make progress with her company. That was probably like the extreme end of hands-on engagement where like I was hacking, building things, and then she was able to use to like get an MVP and get like a seed round. There's been some where I've met them just a couple times, and really I'm like, hey, look, if you need help, email me. If not, like we got connected through a friend. I invested in their company, and maybe once every 2 or 3 months they'll reach out to me, either to like get connected to somebody or like with a problem and say, hey, is this something you know about? And I'll ad hoc jump on the phone with them. And then there's the most of them are like catch up once every month or two, and they have like a prepared list of like, okay, look, these are the 3 things that I've been queuing up to talk to you about, and then we go through all 3 of them. It can either be an email, right? Sometimes they'll send me an email so I get time to prep, and then we'll just walk through once I've had time to think about it, or it'll just be an ad hoc, so like, hey, look, these are the 3 things. How should I think about them? And this is like, you can imagine this being a meeting with someone you manage, or like a peer, product peer, or something like that, where you have a 1-hour meeting and you're like collaboratively problem solving.
Anything in particular people need to watch out when doing advising, for example, from a legal perspective or from other things people may forget to pay attention to?
Yeah, I don't know, because I haven't gotten into trouble yet. I would have a really good answer for you if I'd done something wrong and like gotten screwed for it. I don't know. I've just generally apply common sense. I'm sure there is an answer. I don't have one. What I think about is, informing people at work when there may be potential conflict. Like that's a basic one, right? Letting folks know that you're doing this, especially if you're getting paid for it. I think it's just good form to let your employer know that you're engaging in sort of another paid engagement somewhere. And and then making sure that you divulge any conflict of interest. Well, there is one. There is a company that is kind of in, so like Convoy is in the trucking space. There's another company that's in the freight forwarding space. That's like a pretty small startup. And so like that's an interesting one, right? Where I have to go tell my CEO that, hey, look, I'm working with this other company. There's no real overlap, but also like it's sort of in the logistics space. So just letting you know. And there was one company where they were building a recruiting, like a AI ML interviewing, like a ML interviewing tool thing, and then they wanted Convoy to use it, and they wanted me to pitch it to our team. And I sort of just made the connection and exited myself from the decision making process because like I just didn't want to muddy up the waters. If I have an investment and I'm advising a company and then my company is going to buy their product, that just like makes things gray in the gray zone. So I just made the connection to a data science leader and I just completely exited that conversation.
That's helpful to know. On the other side, are there any best practices that you learned from your previous interaction with those companies that folks here they can apply when they start doing that? You mentioned one thing that always let them know that this is your opinion, so they need to figure out whether it's going to work or not. Are there other sort of best practices that you recommend?
Yeah, I think I have some empathy for this because I've been on the other side of it where, when we were doing Audiogalaxy, we didn't formally have advisors, but like any friend or family will have opinions and like they'll like talk to you as if they know what the hell they're talking about. And then you start doubting yourself, right? Like, so like if you're a founder and, your job is to know your field and you've studied it and you have an opinion and you have conviction and then someone just like does a drive-by and gives you a piece of advice that conflicts with stuff that you're convicted about, now you just start doubting yourself. You're like, man, am I doing the right thing? Is this like, you really like get nervous. And as a founder, that's a really shitty feeling. So having been on the other side of it, I try to make sure when I'm talking to people, I don't try and get them too confused or insecure about their own convictions, right? I'll say, hey, look, you know what? This is what I think. Here's why I think this way. Here are the pros. Here are the cons. Based on what I know, this may work. But again, like I'm sort of opening up and walking you through my pros and cons list and my thought process, so then you can understand my value, my advice for what it's worth. Versus, coming in and saying, oh, you should do this, and this is the way to do it, and this is the technology you should use, and here's the approach. Like, if I say all that, but I don't back it up with why I think those are the right reasons, I just feel like it's doing disservice to the person you're trying to help. Because now if they don't agree with you and they don't state that in the meeting, then they're just going to go back and agonize over like, oh, should I listen to Viraj or should I like do this other thing that I've been thinking about doing? So I think to answer your question, Jerry, just like being very explicit about why you think what you think, listing pros and cons without much bias. Like, hey, look, you know what, this can go wrong, and if it goes wrong, you're gonna have to be prepared to handle it. But I think the odds of it are X or Z. So like just being very objective in your advice, I think is good form. And then being pretty candid when you don't know. Like, there've been times, and you've probably interacted with people several times who like just drop technology terms or just like, talk as if they know everything. And really you're like, man, you just like dropped a bunch of buzzwords. What the hell? So I try to be pretty clear when I say, hey, look, I know nothing about this, but what I will do is I'll connect you to somebody who does. Most of us probably know people who are great at different things that you might not be great at. So like, I won't hesitate at all to connect somebody to someone. Like, I'll give an example. I have not kept up with big data evolution. That's just never been my focus. That is a thing that a lot of companies ask me about. And then, I give them my perspective on what I know. And then I say, look, beyond this, I don't know much, but I can connect you to people who know a lot more than I do. And, just make that connection and let them run with it. Just being upfront about it versus kind of like, trying to project that you know everything, because nobody does.
That's helpful. Looking back, do you think what do you think when people need to start thinking about well, I need to get myself ready, or I'm ready to advising other people.
Yeah, I was very insecure when the first one of these happened. Like this friend I told you who went to VC, they called me and they're like, "Hey, can you help them?" I was like, "Man, are you sure you want to ask me? I can name four other people smarter than me who you should ask." I think it's okay. Like, you all probably know about imposter syndrome. You're gonna suffer. Anytime you do something new, you're gonna experience it. I experienced it. I still experience it all the time. Um, Look, generally, if you're self-aware enough, you know where you're decent, if not great. If you know what you know and you don't know what you don't know, and sorry, if you know what you know and you know what you don't know, I don't think you should hesitate. Because like the worst that will happen is somebody will like ask you a question, try and get advice from you, realize that they don't want to like meet with you anymore, and that will be the end of it. Like the downside is not that much. Um, and the upside is pretty high, right? You could end up with like a strong relationship with a company that can go on for years, or you end up learning something about yourself or about how, what you said did or didn't add value. The downside is still great. I think if you have a hunch that you're like better than most people around you at something, that's, in my opinion, a pretty strong signal that you're ready to help in at least that dimension. Um, but having said that, if somebody asks you for advice, like, as long as you caveat it with the right things and sort of know the limits of what you're talking about, I say just jump into it, right? There's almost nothing to lose.
Hey, this is Alan. Do I mind? Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go for it. I think somebody else posted, Adam, I think posted a question in chat. We could do that as well.
Yeah. I was actually gonna kind of echo a little bit of what Adam posted in the chat here. So assuming that everybody here, does have, a good amount of expertise, domain expertise. All of us also, have been in the industry for a number of years. I'm assuming all of us have, a lot of expertise and advice to provide. To your point, it sounds like your initial foray into advising companies was almost happenstance. It was like a former colleague became a VC. I'm curious if you yourself had to reach out to other companies. Basically, how do people kind of get started if their network isn't asking them directly, hey, like, can you advise me on something? Is there a way to to bootstrap ourselves into the situations where we will provide that advice?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think Jerry referenced it briefly up top. I don't do this, but I know a lot of advisors who've done this really well. Is like generate a lot of content, get yourself out there. I'll use the example of security. We have a couple security people, right? Like security is a very complex field that's evolving so fast, requires a lot of expertise. Like, when I was doing Audiogalaxy, I took about a week of studying and I did all my own security stuff. I would not dare do anything other than nowadays. This was 10 plus years ago, so I got a pass. But like, so let's just take that example, right? Let's say you're like in the security domain, you know a lot about security. Start generating content on LinkedIn, in blog posts, as long as like high quality content and you're demonstrating that you have subject matter expertise, reaching out to people in your field who you presumably know and saying, hey, look, if you know somebody looking for help with security, I have some time, I'm happy to help. So like put yourself out there is one way to do it. That's something I wish I would have done more of, to be honest. I didn't invest in that stuff. Like I did get lucky, like you said. But if you have a chance to do that, I think that's one avenue. The other one is a lot of incubators have mentorship programs like the Techstars thing I mentioned. So reaching out to those incubators and say, hey, look, I've been in the security field for XYZ years. If you have companies looking for security advice or any startups in the security space that would want to talk to me, happy to do it. It's super easy to have that sort of foot in the door conversation when you don't talk about investing and compensation and fees. It's like, dude, I'm giving you my time for free. Take it or leave it. But like, so like that's super easy. Like the Techstar stuff I'm talking about, it's free. Like, you don't get paid for it. You're essentially doing a service and they actually benefit from it, right? Because Techstars invest in that. But the benefit for you is it helps you build your brand. It helps you get these reps on how to advise and how to like have these conversations. And then what will happen is, let's say you get introduced to one company and they like talking to you. They have their own network. Somebody asks them, hey, I need security help. They'll connect you to them. And so like that's how it sort of spreads, right? It's like a flywheel. And then the third one, I think, is just through investments, right? I think somebody mentioned that they like have invested in companies and advice through them. So like that's the third option. You can just become an angel investor, either independently, again, which has its own bootstrapping problem. How do you do that? But if you have friends starting companies, you can invest in them, or there are angel networks that you can join. They're pretty local ones. So like, I know Seattle has like 4 or 5 of them. So if you can join those networks, then you can say, hey, look, I'm willing to invest, but my investment thesis is that I'll invest in companies that could actually benefit from the expertise I have. And you're not making $100,000-$200,000 investments. These are small $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 investments. But then that gives you this foot in the door plus skin in the game, right? Where you're investing in a company, and if your thesis was that, hey, I'm going to invest in you only if there's some value I can add to your product or your company, then they're going to take you up on it. So if we go back to the security example, right? Imagine some company working on a security product. They're going to need expertise. So you can say, okay, I'll invest in your company because you need security expertise, and then I'm sort of one of your security experts that you can bounce ideas off. So then that way you can get an advising relationship with them. Jay, did I cover? Is there any other major like how to break into advising that you know about that I didn't talk about, or like anybody else?
Well, I have one more question. But if anybody else have a question, feel free to jump in. Otherwise, after this, it's going to be open Q&A anyway. So you mentioned a couple times doing angel investing to the companies you're advising. I think folks here might also be interested in that as well. So can you share some experience with that and how, like when you're advising for a company you're angel invested, so what kind of difference it is compared to other type of companies that you're not an investor?
Yeah, I think most companies, actually all but one company I've advised, I've sort of ended up being an investor in. Because here's the thing, right? Ultimately my time is valuable. Just because I could spend that 1 hour with my kids, which is still valuable to me. So after a certain point, you reach a threshold where like, hey, look, if we're going to keep engaging with each other, like we need to figure out some way for me to either get a fee or get compensated for my time. That's part of it. And part of it also really is to like give them confidence that, hey, look, I'm going to give you advice that actually is net valuable to you because I have skin in the game as well, right? So that's sort of been the thesis around how most of my advising relationships have ended up as angel investments. And again, I don't have the kind of money where I would go invest a whole bunch. So it's like just like a sort of, it's like in the $10,000 to $25,000 range, which essentially is like non-significant when you think about the larger fundraising environment we're in. So in terms of like how that happens, it's so I'll go back to that. Like when my friend who became a VC introduced me to this company, I met with them 3 or 4 times, and then after the 4th time, I was like, okay, look, you know what? I've really enjoyed talking with you. You guys seem to have a good product. All out about it is this next round, anyways. And I want to keep working with you. I'm gonna get in on that round. And they're like, oh, that's perfect. Like we really want you in because you've been helping us. Let's just keep it going. And so like that's a happy path. There's been one instance where it did not work out this way, right? I was helping this company. I actually spent a lot of time, like maybe 10, 12 hours with them. And then I was like, hey, look, I've been thinking so, and they kept coming back to me with questions and like asking for more help. And I had to like just pause and say, hey, look, I want to keep doing this, but like at some point this is getting expensive enough for me in terms of my time invested that we should figure out some way where I have skin in the game, because I don't want to just like, invest my time into this without knowing that I'm helping you, but also it just seems like the fair thing to do. And they're like, okay, you know what, that makes sense to me, but at this point, that's not something I'm ready to do. And we sort of just like stop. And I think that's okay. Like, I don't feel bad about it. I don't feel like I wasted 10 or 12 hours or whatever I did. Like, I learned stuff. Hopefully they benefited from my advice, and we decided not to continue. Yeah, I think for something like this, it's kind of nice also to know what your area of expertise is. Right. So like, if Jerry's making a connection to a VC, it'll be good for him to know, okay, look, if a VC asks me about XYZ, I can go to this person.
Yeah, that just saves time to other stuff, like to get known.
Yeah.
Cool. Looks like almost all the answer we got is yes. That's good to know. Thanks. All right. Patrick, I'll hand over back to you.
Thank you, Jerry. Well, that ends sort of the formal part of the conversation to help set some of the context for advising and how that connects with angel investing and relationships with different companies. So really now the time that we have is to turn it over to everybody on the call to ask questions and to dig in further. So at this point in time, I'm going to step back a little bit. So if you have a question, jump on in, ask Viraj, and let's get the conversation started.
Yeah, I had one question. I guess curious for your situation specifically, and maybe what you see more broadly. Do you find that most of the needs of these companies on advising tend more towards your expertise in technical solutions or kind of engineering, organization, and the business side of things?
Yeah, for me, it started off with technical, but it's migrated more and more towards organizational and business and product. I'd say, like, they'll say, hey, I want to solve this problem, and I'm like, they'll like go over engineer the product side of the solution, and I see myself spending a lot of time saying, no, simplify this. Like, you're like trying to solve too many problems, just like find this one problem to solve. So like there's a lot of stuff around recruiting and scaling. How do I recruit? Who do I recruit? How do I interview? How do I evaluate? How do I set up this? Do I get a director? Do I get a VP level person? Do I get a back-end engineer? Do I get a front-end engineer? Like a lot of like organizational stuff like that. Some like strategy business stuff around, hey, look, I'm looking to raise a Series A. Like, does this deck look okay to you? What are some of the metrics I should think about? And I think this is also because like I have changed my role along the way, where I used to be like 100% on the engineering side of things, but more and more I am sort of in the business side of things and doing like fundraising with our CEO and a whole bunch of like non-technical stuff. Initially though, it was all like pretty technical, right? Where essentially people are using me as a technical co-founder buddy. So like that example I gave about me spending a bunch of time hacking together an MVP for somebody who was purely technical. There's been situations where, I'll be connected to a founder who is the business person, and then they'll say, hey, this person is my technical co-founder, but they don't have somebody to talk to. Can you talk to them? And so like, we'll just talk about like, I've had conversations about, on day one, when you're creating your user table, just like shard it into two, even if your company has like 2 users. Just create 2 shards that will, 3 years from now, if your company's still around, that'll be one of the best decisions you made. So like, just some like technical conversations about that. But it's been migrating more and more towards sort of the business and organizational side.
So Viraj, you mentioned self-awareness in there. I think it's a strong starting point, right? You need to have that conviction that you're generally better than most people, or generally good at something to be able to advise. Is it wrong to think of sort of that, as you get bootstrapped into advising, to use that as a measure of, like, as a way to measure yourself on that conviction, right? Like, let me go advise on something. I think I know I'm pretty good at it, and let me try it and see if it works out, and that will sort of prove or disprove my own conviction. Is that a fair way to look at it, or is that sort of you're of course putting the other side in a bigger jeopardy situation?
No, I think if you're upfront about it, you're not causing them harm other than maybe the time they've spent talking to you, right? I do think, well, you're right. Like, it helps you learn more about yourself as well. You can get some of this very explicitly, where like people will tell you, it's like, but I talked to this other person and I asked them the same question and they told me something completely different. Or you'll get it implicitly, like, where they'll talk to you once, maybe a second time, and then just stop talking to you. Like, which could mean a lot of things. One of it could be that, look, you know what, stuff you told me wasn't valuable to me. But I think that's okay. Like I said, like the biggest downside for you here is you learn something more about yourself. And you spend an hour or two. But I think that's like a fair trade. So I wouldn't hesitate. Where this backfires. So since I sort of spoke about where this works, I also this happened with me once, so I can like speak to it. Where I started off in a way where in a domain that I knew about, and then I quickly like veered into something I didn't know about, and I started making statements about like as if I knew what I was talking about, and I clearly didn't, and I know I was sort of bullshitting or like just using very surface level knowledge, pretending like I knew, and then I had to go back to them and email them the next day saying, hey, you know what? I've been thinking about this stuff I told you. You really should like go talk to somebody else, because what I told you was like pretty surface level advice. Which felt bad, to be honest, in hindsight. And now I'm very upfront about it. Where I'm like, hey, look, you know what? I know a little bit about this, but you shouldn't take my word for it. Here's what I do know. But if you want more, I can connect you to somebody who knows more than me.
Viraj, this is Jim. How much do you think your own startup experience make a difference when you sort of come in as an advisor, and how those founders look at you?
It definitely makes a difference for me personally, because I can empathize with the founder situation, and it's like like I can put that hat on when I'm talking to them, which then allows them to get a little more credibility. Both like having that on your resume gives them some credibility. Like, hey, look, this is not just a big company person talking big company game. They've actually done like a startup of their own, and they know what they're talking about. But then from my perspective, it allows me to moderate my advice, because I can hear what this sounds like from the other side. What's a good example? Yeah, if you're an engineering manager and you're giving advice to an engineer, because you've been an engineer in the past, you can sort of wear that hat and sort of hear it through their lens and say, okay, look, like this is what I would hear if I said it, if I was on the other side of the table. So in those terms, it definitely helps me. And yeah, it does buy some level of like basic credibility. If I had never worked, let's just say, I had worked only at like Microsoft or Google or Facebook for all my career, it would be hard to give advice to somebody who's at a startup, just because I would not have that frame of reference. Like, all these big companies, like they're in their own bubble all the time. And I've been at Microsoft, and I sort of know what it's like over there. So that's where it gets a little harder. But then again, I feel like, I go back to security. Like security is a great example where like security can cross that boundary very easily, because the class of problems and the class of solutions are very similar. The resources are different. Like, Microsoft or Google can throw just a different level of resources to solving the security problem, but like the base problem.
Thank you.
What's the difference then between a consultant and an advisor?
Okay, so in my mind, the biggest difference is consultants I've worked with never have skin in the game the same way that employees or founders or advisors or board or like investors do, right? It's like if you're coming in as a consultant, you're making your $220 an hour no matter what you do. Like you sit and have coffee for an hour, you still make your $220, or like whatever your hourly is, or like if you're just grinding it for that hour, you're still making that same amount of money. And then it's like a little bit of like every transaction counts with the consultant, right? Especially like these big company consultants. If you send them an email and they spend 15 minutes replying to your email, you're on the clock. But for me, like if someone sends me an email, like whatever, I'll just like respond and I won't even remember that I did that. And so it's not like a penny pinching relationship, I guess. I don't know how best to describe it, but yeah, the skin in the game is probably the best way to describe it.
Cool. Maybe like a different degree of trust as well, like related. to skin in the game?
Yeah, or like ownership, like a consultant. Well, reputationally, I guess it matters, but they don't really have ownership of the problem in the same way. Where like if you and I build a relationship, and I advise you to like choose technology X or Y, let's say. If I'm a consultant, I go away and I never come back and talk to you because we never had that relationship. But if we're in this advising relationship, we now have this thing where like, if my advice didn't work out 6 months from now, you're going to come and talk to me and you're say, dude, like you gave me some shit advice 6 months ago and I'm paying for it now. And, I feel bad about it. And like, there's like a little bit of that like ownership responsibility piece that I think just doesn't exist with the consulting side because it's super transactional.
In the spirit of some of the insights that Viraj shared about the power of sourcing opportunities for becoming an advisor, one of the things that really stood out to me in hearing this was when you seek out ways to add value to people and figure out how you can make an impact using your superpower and your experience. I think the other thing I was really excited about, and I think a lot of people's questions were about where do I begin? How do I even begin to source these different opportunities? And this is something that I have a particularly strong point of view on that I wanted to share as a close, because I think it really relates to the spirit and like the reason why a community like the engineering leadership community exists. And so there's this person, his name's Keith Ferrazzi. Keith Ferrazzi writes, he's a preeminent author that writes about networking and relationships. And the fundamental belief that he has, it's not about what you can get from other people, but it's about what you can give. And so my point of view, and to use some terminology that Viraj brought up about the flywheel, is that if you're looking for a place to begin and to source different opportunities, one thing I would figure or to build in is to take an hour of your week and to look through what's going on in your network and to think, what can I give people right now? Who can I connect? Who can I help out along their goals? Because what happens in the flywheel that happens is you become known as somebody who is providing value and impacting other people. So if you're connecting people to job opportunities, or if you're helping connect people with, if you're matching advisors to another company, it's not yourself, that's when you become known as somebody who become really helpful and really impactful. And I can tell you I used to spend my Friday, 1 hour every Friday, going through anybody I talked to that week to see how I can help them. And the results were really interesting. And sometimes the impact didn't get felt till 5 months from now. So what I would encourage is, what can you give, not what you can get, and how can you give unto other people? And that then may result in an advising opportunity with your expertise. I really appreciate you all joining. Viraj, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your lessons, and providing some really good caveats for people to not take your advice. I think that's something I really appreciated as well.
Yeah, I'm just gonna like inception the heck out of this thing by saying, don't actually listen to anything I said.
Awesome.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks for taking time, everyone.